things happening, but I think it is right now. So, welcome, friends, and time space to this preview. I've got one more button to hit. Okay, we're good. So, that one looks like this, and a little bit of record to the cloud, wherever the heck that is. Greetings, friends. Gemini Brett here. I'm so happy to be at the side virtually of my first ever astrologer and astrology teacher, Daniel Giamario of the Turning of the Ages Mystery School. We are kicking off a series of seminars to honor, revere, and align with the out of bounds moon and the great 18.6-year lunar standstill cycle. Daniel, thank you so much for bringing me in as a wingman for this one to share some of the
Oh, come on, just
astronomy
total
of where it
collaboration
is.
here. No wingman here, so to be able to sit here with you, who's taken these teachings further than most anyone I know, as far as land and sky, and I really salute you for that. And it's great to be able to do this particular portion of our craft, which is probably one of the 2 or 3 most foundational experiences that I've had that actually inspired this whole approach. So to be able to do this with you is just a great pleasure.
Right on. How are things in the tropics at this time?
We are in our one and only dry and clear sky season that only happens for about 2 months, February and March. The rest of the time, it's why there's really not much of a sky lore tradition here, because the 10, 11 months of the year it's just clouded over. They do in the South here have a tradition which is similar to Hawaii, where they have a certain teaching for each day of the moon based on the shape of the moon. They're using the 29.5. So that sort of Polynesian thing is connected also to southern Philippines. So I have found some records regarding that, but post Hispanic presence, it's really it's really hard to find.
Hmm. And so it's like a name for every day of the moon's.
Right. And it's actually the ones that kept it alive, as far as I can tell, are the Sulu pirates, the ones that were out on the ocean a lot.
Right, because you really got to know when the big waves come and all that, right? Yeah, it's amazing the celestial knowledge of this wayfaring tradition and how some of that's coming back around now, and so much of this ancient information, which is some of what Daniel and I both have such a deep love for. I mean, when Daniel and I first connected, of course, it was over astrology, and I listened to I don't know, a million hours of Daniel Giamario audios and old radio shows, anything I could get my hands on online before we first connected. And then I went and started studying with him shortly after. And, in the same room, we got to talk about our love for music and a love for the, well, secret history of the world, and also just a dear love and reverence for these sacred sites around the world. Um, and I quickly noticed that Daniel's star log is basically my bucket list. So I've checked a good amount off now. I've done the Chichen Itza solar serpent and Machu Picchu at a solstice and some other things, but I'm always excited to kind of sit at Daniel's foot and hear him talk story about deep experiences at these many sacred sites around the world.
Did
And
you ever
at
make it
sacred
over to Fish
times.
Lake Valley?
I have not yet, and I'm
Uh-huh.
very excited to.
One of the things we're hoping for during, I know you won't be there then, but during the annular total solar eclipse that is happening in October, it's only about an hour from where we're going to have as our base for it. And then you go the other hour and you're in the eclipse path. So that's near Tonopah, Nevada, which so we'll be able to introduce some people to the Fish Lake Valley site, not for the totality, but not for the annularity, but it's only an hour in one direction, and then the other hour in the other direction is the eclipse path.
Yeah, and I love hearing you bring Fish Lake Valley in now because I really wanted to ask you a couple of things like, well, which of these sacred sites around the world, whether publicly known or kind of private like that one, or discovered by you, have been the sites that are like most unique as contributors to your astrological approach?
Um, Well, the very first insights I had to get into this approach was in Mount Shasta, and that was on a vision quest that I did back when Joan Halifax was associated with the Ojai Foundation. And it was up there on the mountain that I first realized that if I'm going to be an astrologer, it has to be connected to land and sky, which is we made a feature of our school that if you're to be foundationally or even to be fully certified, that there's a training in the night sky. And so I think we were at the vanguard or the forefront back in the 80s of bringing that understanding out. After that, it was a Joshua Tree. And it was a Joshua Tree Wonderland of Rocks, where I had my apprenticeship actually with a very large rock formation that instructed me to apprentice and to be there one weekend a month for a year. And it was during that time. It actually came in at a full moon, the Magi full moon in early January of 1982. And I started taking people out to camp on the land and to be under the sky, doing readings for them, out in nature and at night. And that's how a lot of the different techniques that I now use came in during that time.
Did I ever tell you how I almost died there?
No.
Well, so I mean that site's been important to me, right? And I saw Uranus with my naked eye there, Vesta on the
Oh,
same night. And I went when I was young, but especially after meeting you, it was like this place on the map, and I would go to when I could. But there was one particular day, and it was a son's Taurus ingress one year, and I wanted to like walk the path that I understood you take to Grandfather Rock, to what I
right.
understand is kind of the most important site for you there at Joshua Tree. And I
Yes.
walked the path and I got there and I did my thing and I, anchored into this lineage the best that I could energetically. And
Hmm.
then on the way back, because the cacti were blooming so beautifully, it was after all these droughts. It was that year when you could see the desert bloom from space. I felt like I needed to like bring offerings to the cacti, and I totally went off path. And then I had to like practice what I preach and work with my shadow as a sundial and follow the crow. And I call them in and do all these things to like make it out of the desert. Because it was
Well,
one
were you in the Wonderland area at that time? Because
I totally was. And
because
I looked
that's like a
around like
labyrinth.
this and it was just desert everywhere. And I
It's a
had like,
maze. It's like a maze. I actually got lost back there once myself. I didn't almost die, but getting lost back there is relatively easy, because
yeah, I
it's
guess I should say I didn't almost die either. I just thought I was going to. And
all
finally
right.
I got out just as the sun was setting and it was nighttime and Jupiter was beaming and I was just like, dude, thank you. So sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to share that.
Oh no, it is very much. I mean, if you experience the magic, interesting magic of the maze or labyrinth of that area, that's part of the initiation.
So what about Fish Lake Valley? Where is that and how did you come across it?
Well, I mean, that happened a bit later. So if I did a kind of chronology on it, the next major connection was actually with Haleakala. And actually all through the 80s, if I looked at put the 80s and 90s together, but it's all started in the early 80s. I probably did about 50 backpacks in and out of Haleakala. And that is a place that is on one hand unbelievably clear skies, but then with nothing blocking. But then number two, it has been measured as being the most silent place on the entire planet. And it was the first time in my life I experienced the sound current. The inner sound that's louder than any outer sound when you're in a place like that. So that was really important. Then following that, it was Scotland and Callanish. And later on, I can tell the story about how that all started, because that connects in with our main theme about the lunar standstill. And then I was living. This was right after the conclave of the Project Hindsight. My wife and my wife at that time, we moved to the Mimbres River Valley in New Mexico, just north of Deming, south of Silver City. right in alignment with the Chaco meridian. And the place we lived, it just turned out that right across the road, dirt road from us, was I found a site that was unmarked. Nobody knew about it, on the top of a hill. I have some photos of that we can look at sometime during our time together. But it was a site that was aligned with many things. It was just like on the top of a rhyolite hill structure that looked like an ancient a dragon, actually. And this was like near the head of the dragon. And you can see that from the Fish Lake from Faywood Hot Springs. And so that area was hugely instrumental. And it was that time that I would take road trips back and forth between that area of New Mexico and Nevada City, Grass Valley, where I had a regular, a lot of students and clients there. And it was on my way to Nevada City that I saw the White Mountains. And it was on one of the years that there was still a lot of snow left on the top of the mountain. And there's something that happened where I got this, because the road went with it about 60 miles of it. And I got this sense, you must come over here. And so the next trip that I did, I gave myself an extra period of time just to go over there. And it was sort of like a vision quest experience in my truck. And I was just going back and forth down dirt roads. Where's the spot? I know there's a spot here. I can just feel that it's being called me over. It's calling me over here for some reason. And right around sunset, I said, "Well, I cannot. I mean, I've gone down enough roads, and I'm just going to stay here." And so I parked the truck, and I felt his presence. And I turned around, and there was this massive rock formation of petroglyphs. And it turned out to be an entire hierophany, where there were petroglyphs all up and down this whole ridge. And over the course of then years, we took our students out there. I went up there alone. That was the place I used to go just for my own internal work and research. And it's also a place, interestingly, Gemini, where in 2006, at the lunar standstill that was happening at that point, there's a hill formation, and I had a feeling it was a master site that tracked everything. And so I was sitting on the main seat. It's like a commander's seat with controls, where you have petroglyphs showing the how many moon phases there are in a month, and it's just an incredible place. And I'm sitting there, and the moonrise during the standstill point in 2006 rolled over the edge of the cliff face, and that's the only time in the entire year that would have happened. So for me, that was because otherwise it would never be out that far, and the moon would never go up that ridge except at that point. And so, oh yeah, it really is a master site, So
And you
that was
didn't go there for that day intentionally. You were just there to experience.
no. I wanted to go there during that season at some point, and then I noticed in creating the time that I was there, it would be at a point of the northern extreme is what it was, and I chose a time period of late Gemini, early Cancer moon, and I just wanted to see if there was anything, right? And in fact, there certainly was, So it's part of this thing that's very, very difficult. I know you know what I'm talking about here, to put into words. Like, what is it that takes place? And then you can sort of tune into how the ancients might have done it, how to find a place of center, a place that you can, just with the landscape, you can track everything. And you have the orientation in such a way. I mean, it's like well before they did stone circles, It was just like doing it with the natural landscape and then arranging things in such a way. It's quite a profound experience for me. And even whenever I would go there, I would get that, the chills and back of the head, it's like, the mother is present, the sense of that connection to the Virgo mysteries, which are so
Mm.
important to me, that happened also at Callanish. It happened at Fish Lake Valley. I mean, at Haywood Hot Springs area, the Mimbres River Valley area, and Haleakala. So I mean, those are the places that have meant the most to me. I mean, later I had the chance to go to places like
I'm going to stop you right there and just talk Haleakala for a second, if
yeah,
that's
yeah,
okay. I
sure,
mean, it's
sure.
been such a powerful place for me as well, and for anyone who goes up there, I mean, and I love that, you know, I'm kind of, I don't love that they're putting telescopes on grandfather's head, as some locals put it, right? And there's other places that those could go. I mean, I do appreciate some of the nebula images we receive and whatnot, but it's such a sacred space. I like that many people visit there who aren't necessarily like in the magical world, because they're going to have a magical experience and likely get turned on.
Yeah, yeah.
And we love that Haleakala means the house of the sun, right? And so Maui, it's so beautiful, that island, because on one side, on the eastern side, you have Haleakala, right? In the eastern side where the sun rises. And then on the western side, you have Halimahina, it's the house of the moon. Of course, the moon doesn't rise in the east. Everything rises in the east and sets in the west. But when you're looking from Halimahina on the kind of the moon side, or they call it the West Maui Mountains these days, you can really track the dance of the sun throughout the course of the year, just in where it's rising on Haleakala. And then if you're on the Haleakala side, like I have dear friends who live up in Kula, on the way up, for example, that have a really beautiful sunset or western view. You can see, of course, the sunset every day of the year and keep the days in that way, which is one of the things that we're really excited to kind of show you in this seminar series, and to help you kind of align yourself in body to this great dance of the sun throughout the year. But you could, of course, also therefore track the setting of the moon every day and the setting of the full moon every month. And we know, of course, these were like lunar calendar and solely lunar calendar people. So I am so sure that many of these sacred places, these heiaus of Hawaii, have these lunar maximum and so-called maximum and minimum alignments too. And the cool thing here is, like, we're kind of on like the cutting edge of archaeoastronomy, because it hasn't been long for academics to even accept that, stone stacking heathens, right, which is the old view of places like Stonehenge, would have the astronomical awareness to align stones, not only to like equinox and solstice sun experiences, which you better do if you want to keep the days, if you like things like food, right? Like, whether you're an agricultural society or a nomadic society, it's very helpful to understand where you are in the year, right? Because the herd's only going to be there at certain times, etc., right? But that also, many of these sites had these lunar extremes. This is the 18.6 year cycle that we're really here to kind of tune you into in this seminar series. And I was really interested, Daniel, in because you've been on this trip for a long time and looking at these sacred sites. In your experience, when did academia kind of start awakening to the truth that the ancients had this astronomical knowledge? When did they start accepting that, yeah, like Stonehenge actually does have solstice and equinox alignments?
In the late 1800s, the dawn of astronomy, Sir Norman Lockyer, and he had quite an influence for a while, but then the works were very hard to find, and regular academics said, no, there can't be anything to this. So he was like the first voice. I'm talking about Western world now. I mean, I can't speak for what the Aboriginals knew about it, of course, but this, as far as the academic world, it started with Lockyer. Then, the expression lunar standstill did not even exist until 1969. And that was through the work of the incredibly important figure in our field is Alexander Thom. And it was Alexander Thom who was a surveyorist and he was also a yachtsman. And in the 1920s, he sailed his yacht into it's called Loch Rob, which is the area of water just outside of Callanish in the Outer Hebrides. And he got what it was. and in the 1920s. And then the rest of his life was in measuring every stone circle he could ever go to through Scotland. And he actually ended up doing it in Brittany, where he saw that some of the same things in Brittany. He's the one who came up with the knowledge of what is called the megalithic yard, that they were using the same measuring unit, for at least from there, and also similar in Egypt, actually. So he was able to surmise there was a connection there. I have one of his books. They're also kind of hard to find. Megalithic Sites in Britain, Alexander Thom.
That one I have, and he's such a legend. And I just want to like really emphasize something that you just shared, right? That Alexander Thom, measuring these many sites, realized that there was like a common metric that was being used, right? I mean, these days, like you may have a yardstick or whatever, right? And they're easy to find. Or sorry, folks on the other side, meter stick or whatever it may be, right? But for this connection, this understanding that, wait a second, like that stone over there in that country far away is 3 units of this distance, and this one's 2. And clearly they were using the same foundational structure, kind of expressing a connection between people around the world. And that's something that we'll be exploring at some of the sites that we're going to, because at some of these sites, they seem to have kind of like 18.6 year like woodstocks or gatherings, and you find shells from one coast and metals from another continent or whatever.
Yeah, I
Like
have a fair
people
amount I
getting
can
together,
share
right?
about that particular thing from what we experienced at Callanish. But since we're on this particular track about Alexander Thom, um, the person who is standing on his shoulders is Robin Heath, and he wrote a book specifically about Alexander Thom, Cracking the Stone Age Code. Secrets of the Circle Builders, and it's definitely something worthwhile. And then this is probably hard to find, but there's also the book written by his son, which is the story of his life, called Walking in All the Squares, by Archibald Thom, who passed away way too soon because he was carrying on his father's work. But anyway, back to 1969, so I saw the notes at one point of their mystery school. They were meeting in 1969, and it was maybe only 15, 20 people, and they were having a conversation, what do we call this? and some of the suggestions were, well, we could call it a lunastice. Like complementary to solstice, sun stands still, moon stands still. But they discussed it for a while, and they came up with lunar standstill. And then at that point, they came up with the term that astronomers like to use, which is the maximum standstill and the minimum standstill. What we've done in our school is to not make it sound like one is better or worse, although certainly the maximum one is more dramatic visually, is to call it the outer standstill and the inner standstill. But that was not until 1969, and that was a very critical and exact standstill season.
Right, yeah. So North Node then at 0 degrees tropical Aries, as it will be very soon in January 2025. So we are now moving every day and every month towards this maximum if you will, or outer expression of the moon. And one of the things that I'm here for in this seminar is to kind of show you the astronomy first of why the sun sets in a different place throughout the year, right? Or reaches a different height in our sky throughout the course of the year. And then how the moon can take those Sundance stretches to the next level. And that's happening now. So we're really excited again to kind of share with you not only the timings, but help you see how you can come to those timings yourself, and maybe more importantly, feet on the ground, opening the heart to the cosmic essence, like ceremonializing this, connecting yourself to this as many ancients did. So Daniel, you said a thing a couple times I'm really intrigued. Was like rational astronomy, like science astronomy, not aware of the lunar standstill cycle until the Stone Circle crew, Alexander Thom and friends, like brought it into our modern knowledge?
Yeah, I see I've not seen any references to it. As far as naming the phenomena as a land-based phenomena, that was 1969. Now I have an interesting sharing personally about this. So it goes a little bit into the Callanish story from 1987, but the whole telling of that I'll save for later. I was there for the lunar standstill at Callanish in 1987. And a few months later, I found myself doing a medicine camp in southern Colorado, near Pagosa Springs. And I had heard about Chimney Rock. I'd never been to Chimney Rock. And I heard that they had just released the research. It was the research from Kim Malville. And Kim Malville was the one who did the research on the kivas that are pointing toward the chimneys. And up until that time period, most of the archaeoastronomers, they would say, well, they're pretty sloppy. The sun never rises through there. And he noticed that they were building kivas every 19 years, at different ones on this ridge. And so he was able to figure this out, both as an archaeologist and also as an archaeoastrologist. Did I say that? Archaeoastronomer. That's when the moon would go through the chimneys. Oh my God. And up to that point, the American-based archaeoastronomers did not have, my sense is they either didn't want to accept the fact that the previous inhabitants had that knowledge, or, and this is also what I suspect, they also didn't want to understand the phenomena. So a combination of those factors. So it was actually also in 1987 that the door opened up, at least in North American archaeoastronomy. And that was very intriguing. That also happened in 1987, which was the peak lunar standstill year. So that's just, it's the way I can answer that question. I mean, I'm talking about North America, and there might have been certain places where maybe there was an Australian researcher, maybe there was a South American researcher that knew about it. There's those really mythic, their books are really hard to find, the ones that were like tracking stuff down in Tiwanaku in Bolivia, and we're able to figure stuff out there, but then mainstream archaeology and astronomy didn't want to deal with it. But now a lot of that is being looked at again with fresh eyes.
Yeah, I mean, we should expect when the cycle activates, right, that global awareness is going to be brought to it, whether you're in a place looking for it or not. And we're really excited in this series to bring you, virtually, of course, to several of these sacred sites around the world. Daniel's going to be able to share personal antidotes of being in places like Chimney Rock or Callanish for these lunar blessings, if you will. And I'll show you a place in Ohio that's been preserved only because it's now a golf course. I mean, fascinatingly, when you go to the clubhouse of that golf course, you'll see the mason compass and square above its door. Right? Like, there are people who have been preserving these mysteries, I think, in secret, regardless of what their intention may be. I don't know. But the one that I've kind of recently discovered might actually be a lunar standstill marker is the Bucky Dome at
Right,
Epcot
right.
Center in Disney World, if you can believe that. Because I've just been exploring kind of astronomically how this thing expresses. Because my intent, and this is very true, I think, to Daniel's, like I love to say that astrology is so much more than some symbolic language alone. It is a poetic breath of nature, right? And so when we get outside and renature this craft, we're going to reconnect to the roots of the rules and the proofs of the equations we use. And as we learn to like widen our sky eyes, we're going to be able to bring much more of that astronomical essence,
Yes.
that nature, into our astrological delineation, into our practice, into our understanding of self, and feeling, healing, knowing, growing, helping others do the same, right? Like that's what we're about, and that's what this seminar series is about as well.
I had to interject just one quick thing. I saw a chat, thing. They pop up for like a couple seconds and then disappear. And someone says, Chimney Rock, North Carolina. That's right by me. No, there's a fair number of places called Chimney Rock, but I'm referring to one that was associated with the Chaco culture that is in southern Colorado near Pagosa Springs. So I wanted to clear up that.
We
Um,
have a Chimney Rock here in California as well. And it reminds me, actually, I didn't say this earlier, but if you are here in the Zoom live stream, we'll be doing some question and answer at the end of our jam. I've seen some brilliant questions already pop into the chat. Please use the chat for connecting with each other and sharing your ahas, and use the Q&A button down below to post questions so I'll know where to look at them, and either
great,
respond to them or
great suggestion.
entice
Yeah,
Daniel
otherwise
to
it's
at the
because
end
the
of the
chat's
flow.
going wild. I mean, there's like 60, a lot of people doing that. I can't watch that.
Yeah,
It's
and then
just
there's a whole nother one happening at YouTube, and I can't manage it all, but we're gonna try. So let me bring you into some pretty pictures, friends, and we'll talk a little bit about what you can expect to find in this journey. We welcome you aboard. And I'll show you where you can get to Daniel's website, which is turningoftheages.com, right? I've got it hidden, turningoftheages.com. That link at my website, geminibrett.com/standstill, that you see at the bottom left of the screen, is actually just going to take you to the Turning of the Ages Mystery School site, where you can read more about the project and enroll. We would love to have you on board. I'm just going to take you through, and we'll stop to hear some wonderful living experience antidotes from Daniel along the way. I want to take you through what we're going to do in seminar 1, 2, and 3. So
before you do that, just back up for a second, if you can, to show what you had up there before. This is really interesting to note here because the one at the top is the moon. And then the contrast is with this, this is not an actual site exactly, but that's the sun. Okay. A lot of people look at that first one and they think, well, that must be the sun. No, that was the full moon going across the stones at the lunar standstill. So I like the the contrast between these two. So go ahead. Sorry.
all right, so it's a 3-part seminar. Well, we really have this as part 1, and recording of this jam will be accessible to you on the course page should you choose to join us on the journey. The next jam, they will all be on Mondays, moon days, the day of the moon, quite appropriately. We wanted to launch the ship here on Mercury's day because all hail the magician, but also because today, as we are speaking, the moon is incredibly out of bounds south and actually passing quite close to the Galactic Center. We'll speak a little bit more about that, but that's one of kind of the key expressions of this nodal cycle and the lunar standstill cycle, not only at the maximum minimums or outers and inners, but also throughout the course of the nodal transit. Different stars can be occulted depending on where the nodes are, and I'm excited to share that with you. So I see my role here as astronomy guy. I did, Daniel, put a moon on that light because I figured that that was the moon. But so this is something the astrophotographer knows. It's really hard to photograph the moon. This is actually a much more modern image than that other one we looked at, so I should have known. But the truth is, twice a month, the moon will get to the same declination that the sun was in the moment of this image, and it will then take the entire course, the same course, rising in the same place, climbing to the same height, setting in the same place that the sun did on that particular day. So it's not too wrong for me to put in the bunny ears of the moon right there.
Oh, well, actually, Brad, we didn't discuss this. I didn't realize, I mean, this also, this could be a location in Scotland also, or in Denmark, that would actually show a place where the moon would walk across the land and go through stones. So
Yeah,
once,
or that could be an equinox portal and the solstice portals on the side. If that was true, it'd have to be closer to the equator, and it doesn't look that way. Although there are spots on Maui that look kind of Ireland. It's trippy. Anyway, so one of the things that I'm here to do is to help you see why the moon goes out of bounds. Why does the sun rise due east at equinox and set due west only at that time, but at the solstices find its extremes at the tropicos? That's Greek for turnaround, friends. So when the sun ingresses tropical Cancer, it shines directly above the Tropic of Cancer, for example. So in the first week, we're going to speak instead of like about what we see on the horizons. We'll get there a little bit, but I'm going to bring you to the caduceus staffs of Earth astrology, as I call them, and then help you integrate the two. So just briefly, on the right, we're seeing the picture of lunar latitude. Every month, the moon snakes above and below the path of the sun, which is why there's so much dragon and serpent symbolism with eclipses, and also with lunar nodes, which have long been called the dragon's head and the dragon's tail. There's other parts I call the dragon's back and the dragon's belly, which are part of the essential variables that contribute to the most out of bounds moons. The other caduceus staff that you see on the left is the staff of the tropical zodiac. It is the solar serpent, as I like to say, that the sun, because the zodiac snakes north and south of Earth's equator every year. And when we bring these two staves together, then we see this amazing out of bounds phenomena, which can be seen in sites like this. So Daniel, these are images, I believe, from your most recent trip to Callanish. Is that right?
yeah.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about this site. I know it's going to be one of our kind of key explorations in the first seminar
Yes,
of our series.
I think it would be somewhat, at least entertaining. Certainly was quite entertaining to me when it first happened. I take you all back to 1984, 3 years before the standstill. And I was just getting out of my one and only corporate job. I worked for an airline in Los Angeles, and I had free flight benefits. And so this good buddy of mine, Howard, and I went on a journey to explore stone circles of Scotland. And it turns out that near the end of our journey, we found ourselves at Callanish. And this was before they put a fence around it. And he and I decided to camp in the middle. And it was kind of a misty, cloudy night, and we were there in the middle of the circle. And at about 11:30 that night, out of nowhere, coming down the entrance, was this guy with a knife in his mouth. And he goes right past us, like hiding behind the center stone. Howard, my friend Howard, and I were just, what in the world is going on? This must be some ancient druid ceremony where whoever gets sacrificed is the one who happens to be there. and he was petrified. And then right around that, my friend, and then as we turned around, there was a ceremonial procession of women in full ceremonial garb coming down the entranceway. And I had enough courage. I went up to her and I said, we have finished our ceremony. May we witness yours? And she said, okay, but be silent, something like that. And we heard all of this Gallic language happening, right? But every now and then I would hear the shining ones, the shining ones. And when the whole thing was over, I went up to her and she was kind of in an altered state. I said, well, what was that? Tell me more. And she just cryptically said, and when the moon walks on the land, and at the calling of the cuckoo, the shining ones will return. And then I said something like, can I learn more about this? Will I ever see you again? And her answer was, do your own research. And then she said, no. and so then I basically got involved in doing some research, and I found the old legendary stories and the whole thing, and I said, oh my God, the moon walks on the land in 1987. And so I had the opportunity to be a facilitator on a group there in 1987. And anyway, that you can imagine how impactful that kind of an experience could be. And since that time period, if you go to Callanish, there is a fence around it, although you can still go any time of day. They close down the visitor center, but not the, you can go there in the middle of the night and just go through the gate.
I'm really hoping to go for some of the standstills coming up. Daniel, before we look at an image of the moon walking the land, I'll ask you to kind of share some of your experiences of feeling that. I mean, I know that's a big piece of what we'll do in the first of the seminar, so you don't have to tell it all right now. But
no, I just wanted to get it started. That was like my introduction to it.
Right on.
There's a far bigger story about 1987, but one of the things I just wanted to briefly mention, and I don't think you and I have talked about this, that when I had been an astrologer since 1970, but I had really not been knowledgeable about out of bounds moons or out of bounds planets. And so actually, my first experience of it was the land version of it, the way the ancients would have known about it, rather than, oh yeah, I got an out of bounds moon. Well, okay, maybe it means this and this, but to actually have that sort of grounded experience of actually feeling and seeing what it actually meant, I consider that to be a really important factor.
Absolutely. I'm just going to grab an image and throw it in here to show some of what I'll be teaching also, like how we can see these things in astrocartography maps. But I want to ask a couple of these or extend some of the questions that came in from the crew here before we move back into the moon walking the land. Shika asks, are the sacred sites related to Earth's ley lines or dragon lines in any way?
Well, there's actually been many who have proposed that, and there's different systems of it. And I certainly think so. I think that actually there's some research that's done that it's also connected to meteorology. That you have to have a certain kind of weather condition also. But as far as the latitude, the location, absolutely. I mean, they're like Earth acupuncture points. And the interesting about it is before the stone circle megalithic builders showed up, human beings were doing it with land. They were not building things to market. That sort of came later. There's places on the planet, one example called the Dingle Diamond, which is all just land orientation. That just turns out to be one of those center points where you can look at, this mountaintop or that sunset point and so on. And it's like a master site, and they didn't even have to put a stone circle in. Later, they would build a church in one of those spots, right? But then the stone circles are like a different kind of technology, stone rows, stone circles, dolmens, other parts of the world, kivas, that are actually then marking in construction, to celebrate the energy of those places.
Right on. Yeah. And I mean, the idea of the song lines or dream lines, ley lines, dragon lines, energy lines, like it's been beautifully mapped, not only in places like the UK, how some of these sacred sites and now churches, as you said, just go on and on. One of my most profound experiences actually in the UK was at a church, Salisbury Cathedral, right near Stonehenge.
Mhm.
And I was taken there. I hired this wonderful woman called Maria Wheatley to take me around, and she's written a book on Avebury. That's kind of her site, and she had us like dousing the stones and dousing the Mary and Michael lines beneath the ground. And she brought a driver because she doesn't have a car, and it was what is his name? Busty. Oh, I forget his last name, but he's like one of the first cats who was photographing crop circles from the air. He was like a
Mhm.
small plane,
Right.
pilot, and he would fly over him. And so he started taking photos. Busty Taylor. And so when I saw him, I was like, Busty, and he's like, what? He's like, you know about me? I was like, man, I'm like, I've watched every crop circle thing ever. You're a legend. And so he
Mhm.
took a liking to me, right? And when we got into Salisbury Cathedral, it was like, hey, Brett, come here. And he pulls this brick out. It wasn't like, I mean, a huge brick out of the floor. It actually has a brass handle in it so you can do this. Because the idea is that at Avebury Stone Circle, the Michael and Mary lines cross twice, and then they snake, right? And then they next cross, he says, at Salisbury Cathedral.
Right. Right.
And he took the brick out and he said, see, they usually run around these underground water currents loosely. And this is a place like in the center of the cross of this cathedral where those water lines cross and the ley lines cross. And I like listened and felt, and man, that's like the highest I've ever been. And
Mhm.
I was completely sober, like, and I just went on a journey. I was on a pew, just like pewing it out for like 20 minutes, and it was like profound. I'm still learning from whatever happened there. So, and then we've seen these, when we stretch these lines out around the world, it will
Mhm.
be like Stonehenge and Teotihuacan with like DC in between, interestingly, and this kind of dodecagonal and icosahedron, like energy grid of Earth, where all of these sites align. And I mean, there's these ancients, and we'll in the seminar series probably speak more about some of our feelings and even findings about the ancient builders of this world. And the immense knowledge that they had. It was so immense, and they were such like world travelers that, maybe they did this kind of global planning, but maybe they were just feeling as Daniel has when he got called in that truck to the Fish Lake Valley site, where I've been walking on a hike and suddenly I have to go to that forest over there, and then there's a sacred site in it, like, and I'm sure many people here have been so called. Maybe they were just feeling these places where the earth is like alive and different and building sites there, and maybe those sites are specifically aligned to this energy grid that some have called ley lines or dragon lines, song line, dream lines, whatever it may be. I mean, it's a mystery. It's a mystery we will not solve completely, but it's certainly one that we will bring our hearts and minds to
Well, it
and be
certainly
kind
relates
to
to the
awaken.
idea that our approach is that the Earth is living. It's a living being, and so that it has everything that any other living being has, and the honoring of that is what these people were definitely doing. And I think maybe I'll reserve until later talking about my own insights about what they were actually doing at Callanish. Let me just say that as a teaser that imagine a Neolithic Woodstock.
Mm. Yeah, and so that'll be a huge part of seminar number one, which is Moon Day, February 27th. I want to say that Paul added here that maybe with an environment that was so much cleaner electromagnetically,
Right.
these things were much easier to tune into then. I probably agree, but I would say therefore it is our job to keep the dream alive and to keep the old codes of the old vibe, right? So there was one other question came in that I'll just answer quickly. Elise asks that she says that she's curious if the south node alignment with 0 degrees tropical Aries. And therefore, North Node tropical Libra has a similar effect astronomically. And the answer is absolutely yes. When the North Node gets to 0 degrees Aries, the northern bending goes to 0 degrees Cancer, which is the most northern degree of the tropical zodiac. And then the moon can get much north of north. And that's one of these extremes or maximums or the outer limits. But when the North Node is at 0 Libra, the limits for the moon are actually well inside the limits of the sun. So I'm going to be showing you all of these things. It's a wonderful question, and keep the questions coming because we'll stop for them a few times along the way. But for now, let me find my way back into these slides. Actually, thanks to that brief stop, had time to add one, because one thing I'm excited to show you along the way too is how these sun and moon dances express themselves not only with our feet on Earth, but if we're looking at Earth from space, which is what this astrocartography map is allowing us to do. This is a map for like a very recent moment here on February 15th, 2023. It looks like I cast the chart locally at 6:17:13 p.m. and I'm in Pacific time zone in Richmond, California. This is the Tropic of Cancer here, and you'll see, by the way, the Cancer glyph. The equinox and at a glyph at an equator, and then Tropic of Capricorn and the Capricorn glyph. Well, right now the moon's in very late degrees tropical Sagittarius. The bounds of the sun are the tropics. This is why we call it the tropical zodiac, by the way. It's very real astronomy, despite what the people say. And the sun can never go further south of the Tropic of Capricorn. Well, here's the moon south of the Tropic of Capricorn. So this is one of the ways that we would see it, kind of looking at the moon-Earth system from space. And what we want to do here is help you align yourselves and maybe even visit some of these sacred sites where you can experience this phenomena here on Earth. So these beautiful kind of recent photos of, I loved in the comments, somebody said it's like, wow, it's like the stones are like wood-like, you know, in their patina or pattern. But here's an older one. And this one, Daniel, I did a very bad Photoshop job. And I brought the moon in here, okay?
Yeah, that well, actually, the original iconic photograph has the moon.
Right, and this is the moon we're looking at, right?
Yeah, that's actually the thing that broke the whole thing wide open. I mean, I happened to be there when Margaret had taken that photo. And at that time period in 1987, there were only about 50 people there. And by the time, the early morning, when the moon walked there, it was down to about 20 people. When I was back there in 2006, there were about 500 there. But this is clearly showing how low the moon is that's the closest full moon to the June solstice. So it's the low moon.
Yeah, actually, when I added the moon here, I wasn't sure if this was an alignment to the rising moon or the setting moon, or what I figured is it's when the moon was so low in the sky that it's walking the land. So this is a really important thing. If you refer or think back to that map I just showed, the Tropic of Capricorn is the furthest the sun can get from Scotland, which is what we're looking at here. The moon can go another 5 degrees south. Because the Capricorn sun is so far from Scotland, that's literally why it's low in the sky. And when the moon is even further away, it's even lower. So this is a site that was designed as Daniel was kind of initiated into that mystery to experience the moon walking the land. And so when
That's
I kind of
that's just
photoshopped
before sunset. So this is like just relatively soon before sunrise.
Yeah, well then so this is like a moon set then, huh? Or right
Yeah,
before
yeah,
moon set? Yeah. So
yeah.
the bunny ears of the moon should be turned a little bit. I didn't know when I was cropping that photoshopped moon over the light there. If you've ever taken pictures of the moon at night, you'll understand that it's really tricky to see anything like stones. And if you expose it so the stones can be seen, the moon's just going to look like the sun. It's going to look like a blaring globe. So I had to do a little poor photoshopping there. And a very beautiful truth, if you follow the moon First of all, once you learn to see the bunny in the moon, you'll never go back to anything else. But the way that the bunny ears rise and set, depending on where on Earth you live, is one way you can really kind of tune
I must
the journey of the
disagree.
moon.
Sorry. Once you see Kokopelli on the moon, you'll never go back to the bunny.
I hear you. I'm more aligned to the kind of Mayan Chinese bunny vision personally. But yeah, we can have a bunny playing a flute and meet in the middle. All right, seminar 2. We're going to first in seminar 1 really kind of explore how high the moon and how low the moon and why the moon can walk the land and how you can experience this where you are. And again, along the way, we will be offering some ceremonial suggestions to get yourself aligned energetically as well. I'm going to show you the timings, but more importantly, like how to know the timings. And one of the great effects that you'll be experiencing literally twice a month, every month from now for years, but it's going to peak in the 2024-2025 times, and maybe most exciting with the solstice full moon. So we'll be looking at that. But you can do it, by the way, with any moon phase, just at different times of the day. But one of the amazing things, and maybe you've been noticing this, friends, recently, is like the moon right now is getting like so high in the sky. I've had people calling me like, "What's like, did the moon break?" It's like, no, this is the standstill cycle. Or it's also like really low, lower than the sun can ever be, and that's happening every month. Like today, I noticed even though it was like a waning kind of crescent phase of the moon, and I saw the moon and the sun in the sky at the same time, that the moon took such a lower path in my sky than the Aquarius sun did later on. And I'm so excited to show you that. In seminar 2, we're going to work more with the horizons, right? So there are so many sacred sites around the world that have temples aligned. If you stand here to the solstice sunrises, to the equinox sunrise, shadow alignments, these kinds of things. And then what's being discovered more and more, and quite recently, as Daniel was sharing before, are that there's also these lunar standstill alignments, both on the outer alignments and the inner alignments. So we're going to take the astronomy that I teach you in session 1 just to the next level. And we're going to take this kind of out of the sky and bring it down to Earth. And I'll show you some pictures from right here, the stone circle I call my office, of how like I'm experiencing this and help you experience it. And one of the places we're going to go to is Chimney Rock in Colorado, where I went just in August of 2022. This is what it looks like pretty nearby from the ground. You can see why they called it Chimney Rock. You can imagine maybe some other names for it too, but let's climb that mountain there. And up here at the site, there are these 2 kivas. There's another one a little bit further away. Kivas are these mysterious kind of ceremonial sites for that you find in the Southwest for the ancient Pueblo people, and kind of the main event. But as Daniel was sharing before, one of the reasons why we understand this was quite intentional is through some archaeological evidence that people had visited this site separated by this kind of 18-ish year separation of the lunar extreme. So I'm going to zoom in here and we're going to look closer to the chimney. And I haven't been there to take a picture of it myself. Daniel has been there, but only the lunar maximum north or the outer north moon can rise between the chimneys like this. The sun can never rise that far north, not even in its wildest solar dreams. The moon can do things that the sun could only dream to do. And, you know, traditionally the moon is queen of dreams, right? People ask me all the time, like, why do they say in traditional astrology that the sun is, well, I'll speak traditionally astrology, the domicile lord of Leo? Shouldn't it be Cancer if that's the longest day of the year? And that's a northern hemisphere thing, right? Well, moon goes even higher in Cancer. And not every month of every year, but every month of this year and next year and the next year and the next year. And so we're going to show you when the out of bounds phenomena gets turned on and turned off. That has to do with what the lunar nodes are, the points from Earth's point of view where the paths of spirit and soul of sun and moon cross. And so one of the things that we see at this site, and I'm so excited to go there and see it too, you kind of you have to get on a list, and it's not available yet and all this stuff, but is that only the moon in these northern extremes can rise between the chimneys.
That is what Kim Malville was able to break the news on. And I had the opportunity to be there in 2006 to actually see it rise on one of those times where they let people in, at the right time in order to see it. It was pretty stunning, actually. I had a marvelous conversation with a Zuni, a Zuni guide who was working there at that time. We'll save that story for later.
Sorry, I was pouring tea because I thought we were going to go into some story time now, but that's even better because that will be a huge kind of deep dive that we take in the second jam of our series.
It has to do with the issue of ceremony and, what the ancients were actually doing and what we can do now.
I will say, when I was there in August, first of all, there's a guy working at the bookstore downstairs. These bookstores at these sites in the Southwest are amazing. So if you're into the archaeoastronomy trip, and I certainly am. And the cat who sold me the book, he had a picture of himself back in his mission control days in the Apollo program.
Yeah.
And there's another cat I've seen so often in the documentaries and whatnot. So we talked there, but I was really happy to see, a NASA cat who was turned on to these, archaeoastronomical mysteries. And when I walked up there, people who were working at the site were very interested in it. I was making some measurements with my shadow, and I noticed actually that from a certain point where I imagine you would stand to witness this happening, and you'll be able to tell us more about where you did stand, Daniel, that the chimney in this direction from the cardinal directions, so it has to be so far north of east where they say the major moon, north moon, rises. I noticed that exactly that same distance on the other side of east was this mountain peak. And I've wondered if therefore, you can see the moon on the other side of the cycle rising there. Mm-hmm. That would still be North Node at 0 Aries, but instead the Capricorn moon. Right. And I mentioned that to one of the, park rangers who works there. And he said, yeah, there's this, they just discovered this temple there. They're calling the Solar Temple. And so I'm wondering if you go over there, then you would see the moon rise in the chimney from the other side. Mm-hmm. And there was long distance work happening. One thing we know is that on a clear night, and there used to be a lot more of those, you can see all the way to Chaco Canyon, which is very far from there. And
well, this was the furthest Chaco outlier. It basically, they had these ceremonial roads that would extend from the Chaco culture, and that was their furthest north outlier. But it was also built near the end of that entire project. And since you're telling a story about that, I'll just share the Zuni story. It's actually part of a lot of the research that I've done regarding the Chaco Meridian, the line that goes down all the way to through the Mimbres River Valley and all the way down to Paquime in northern Mexico. That what happened was, and it's a kind of a really long telling, I'll try to do it in a very short form, that they kept making bigger and bigger and bigger ceremonies as they were going into a time period of drought. And so they did these really major ceremonies. And when I asked the Zuni guy, I very innocently, I said, are you all still doing ceremonies here? And he gives me this look and he said, oh, we don't go there anymore. They took it too far. which is why we had to change our religion to, the Kachina religion, because that's when they kind of split up and they went kind of more into their own unique villages rather than be part of the Chaco culture, which was a kind of a hybrid of the hunter-gatherers that came down and the Aztecs that came up. And they started having elitism and rulers, and the common people became slaves and that kind of thing. And so basically they changed everything because the ceremonies, they had water wars that were happening, and so they don't want to go into that direction. I think it speaks a lot to how we orient ourselves to these things now. But sometimes they went off the deep end, and it usually had to do with the elites that come in and pretend to be better than others.
Wait, that sounds kind of familiar.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Anyway, yeah, there's these stories that like there were alignments at Chaco that were intentionally disheveled and turned off, right? Because the magic was being misused. And so they had to like strip that from people. And I mean, these are in the mysteries, but there's some interesting ways that shows up that I feel like I will share at a later date. So I
Yeah,
really
we
want to
can
get
have
to
a
the
much
Q&A.
longer discussion about this issue, because it also goes back to what were they actually doing at Callanish and what were they later doing at Stonehenge. I mean, those are very, very interesting inquiries.
Yeah, there's a story that I love that you shared with me, I think, when you were up there with a bunch of other astrologers. And I think, and I don't want to tell your story, but I will. But it was at Stonehenge, and you were wondering because I think it was an eclipse event, and you couldn't see the eclipse because it's the UK and it's always cloudy. And there was this question of, well, how did they align these stones to these solar phenomena when it's so cloudy up here? And I was like, no, no, no. And I'll let you tell the answer to that one
Oh,
now.
well, yeah. I mean, this is what they said to me when I asked about that. Is so with more than 1500 BC, it was a completely different weather. And so, well, how come it changed? And these were some Neolithic Renaissance people, the ones that are heavily back into the Neolithic traditions of the British Isles. And they said that's when they stopped doing the ceremonies. That was their answer to it. I noticed this very interesting chat thing that came through. One of the sites that I've been to on a number of occasions was just the one outside of San Miguel de Leonde, which is the La Cañada de Virgenes site. It's quite astounding. It's actually the only site that I'm aware of that is more recently excavated by in harmony with archaeoastronomers. It's a wonderful site. I'm glad you had an opportunity to go there. Just noticed that.
Yeah, I mean, oddly named for a little rock that was found in the river nearby, but it's a beautiful, kind of newly discovered and worked in process pyramid site outside of San Miguel de Allende. One of my favorite, like, solar calendar sites in the world is that, Gothic cathedral copy that's right in the square of San Miguel de Allende. It works the sun better than any temple I've ever seen. It was designed after.
I'm not. I never was familiar with that site. That's really interesting.
I mean, it's like it's a copy of a Gothic cathedral from Cologne that was put over the older Catholic Church, which was probably put over a sacred site there some time ago. But yeah, the pyramid site there, La Cañada de la Virgen, is one of like the most intriguing sites, and it's clear evidence that the 260-day sacred count was continued actually later than many
Yeah.
of the anthropologists and archaeologists had previously thought. And many have now seen that it also, as Daniel was saying before, made its way north here into the southwest lands. Okay, so we better move along because there's so much, but I do want to address a few things that came up in the Q&A. So Phelan asked, what do we mean by the moon walking the land? And it's quite as simple as this. And you'll start seeing it now. And the further you get from the equator, like Scotland, the more the effect shows itself. That the moon, northern hemisphere, at the Gemini Cancer cusp, is as high in the sky as she gets, and that's every month. Okay. And then the Sag Capricorn cusp, the Tropic of Capricorn, is the lowest in the northern hemisphere sky. The opposite's true for the southern hemisphere. And so as the moon literally gets lower and lower in the sky during the course of the next couple of years, lower than the sun can ever get, especially if you're far from the Earth's equator, you can have this experience where the moon rises like right there, walks on the land, and then sets right there as well.
That's
And
the whole
that's
mystery. That's the whole mystery of Callanish, where they basically had the whole site based on the moon going across the body of what looked like a woman lying on her back. And she was called the Old Woman of the Moors or the Kaliak, and the whole site was built in order to honor the Earth Mother that way. And it was when the moon would actually touch down and roll across her body that is what sparked the ceremonies, is when that took place. In fact, certain stones there, certain sites, not the main site, other sites would zero in on other parts of her body. The larger story on that will be reserved for later, about what happened in 1987 when we saw the moon going into her pregnant belly. So a lot of the old legends that were written turned out to be true, having an opportunity to try them out in 1987. So it's the fact that and I should just mention, it can only happen at 58 to 59 north latitude. If you're going further north than that, then the moon is not rising. And if you go south of that, it's not right on the horizon. So it's a very unique feature based upon your latitude.
right, yeah. And where you are on Earth, like you will have your own ways to experience this. So that's one of the things I'm really excited to share with you. There's a bunch of questions in the Q&A which are very similar. Wait, you're talking about a low moon, and then you're talking about a high moon.
Right.
And I'm going to show you very clearly this simple and beautiful and elegant tropical astronomy of the sun, really of the zodiac, and then add the moon to that. And you will understand why every month we get a high moon and a low moon, and why those highs and lows will both increase over the course of the next couple years as we move our way to the lunar
You are
standstill.
such a wizard at doing that.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I mean, I'll be sharing this through a lot of animations to kind of help you integrate it. It's confusing material, and we who are drawn to the mysteries, we esoteric, minded astrologers, don't want to do all the science class, and that's understood. So I like to teach sacred astronomy, as I call it. We will keep the sacred by honoring the scientific, and keep the scientific by honoring the sacred. And so you're going to get a bunch of this, but I'll have some worksheets for you and some practices you can do outside, like creating your own simple sundial and earth wheel to really integrate like the motions of the sun by day, and then you'll get to see how the moon does what the sun does, but much faster. What the sun does in a year, the moon does in a month. And then there's this 18.6 year standstill cycle that helps the moon kind of stretch her magic to the extremes and on both sides of the thing. So it's a lot to explain, and it's a beautiful thing. And I, again, really look forward to sharing it with you. But I think we're kind of moving towards the end here today. We really just want to introduce this scene. And, I think one of the things that, of course, we astrologers will be most interested in is like, all right, what do you do with it? So like, I would share, I think, Daniel, this I'm sure is true for you as well. Like our principal intention is to help you bring your awareness to this so you can go outside, connect with the teachers, the sky, the earth, open your heart, be in the field, experience this as the ancients did. Right? But also, hey, what can we astrologers do with this thing? So we're going to talk about working with out of bounds moon and planets in natal charts or other charts like an electional chart. We'll talk about working with the progressed lunar declination. For some of you, the moon will go out of bounds and come back in bounds. For some of us like me, they won't. And interestingly, my moon is at a zodiac degree that is a high candidate for lunar extreme, and yet where the node is, my moon fights that flow, and I'll show you why. Daniel's moon is on the other side, and it is quite out of bounds, right? So I'm not quite at the so-called lunar minimum time, but I will show you why the moon in my natal chart will never go out of bounds by progression, where Daniel's will every 18.6 years. It's a
And we
wonderful.
also can bring in the something I've only just started tracking, which is also the other planets by progression going out of bounds.
Yeah, and that's an amazing thing. And I mean, because of the other planets moving so slowly, right? They're likely to be there and stay there, but some of us will have that shift at some time in life. I'm one of them. And also, for those of us who have a moon who can't go out of bounds through the wonderful astrological technique called secondary progressions, I will show you other truths that are amazing to see there that we can all use. And then also, one of the things I've been really moved by recently, and I've been going back in life to investigate these times, is, like moon returns every month to your natal degree. Like I have the moon in 25 Gemini, she'll be there in 2 weeks, she'll be there a month later, she'll be there a month later, a sidereal month anyway. But only when you're in a nodal return will the moon actually move over the same space where she was at the time of your birth. And depending on where the lunar nodes are in their 18.6 year transit, the moon will be given like the keys to transit different planets in your chart, not only by longitude, and that's zodiac degree, but by latitude as well, how far north or south of the ecliptic plane, or on a different coordinate axis. We call it declination. And I know that's like a lot of jargon for those of you who have not initiated yourself into that astronomy of astrology side yet, but that's one of the things that I'm here for. And so we're going to teach this astronomy, but then we're going to bring it into our astrological practice.
I'll just add to that the foundational feature of our school, and I think it's one of the ones, the Turning of the Ages Mystery School, and we're collaborating, our two schools, and is the idea that you can get at the great turning of the ages, and we're at a great turning. You can get the new transmissions coming through if you form a relationship with the constellational patterns, the stars, and the planets. And that's how it comes through. I mean, that's how change takes place. It's not something you learn in a book so much. So if you go with the land in the sky and allow yourself to be open to it, then that's how you can get the insights that are coming through at this time, and particularly at a great turning, which is the time period we're in now, which I reckon is 1962 to 2034, but that's a whole other story about why those dates. But we're kind of right in the middle of a great turning, and the mysteries are shifting and changing. So what we thought Aries is not necessarily what it was 2,000 years ago. That's what I would like to say. And that's I think our motive, our intention is really very much the same.
Yeah, folks who are here who have studied with me and not yet heard Daniel yet, you can hear where I get a lot of my juice from, right? And I have to say, a lot of that existed before Daniel and I met, but as soon as I heard the way that he speaks about his love for these mysteries in the sky and getting outside and reconnecting with the living sky and bringing more of that into our chart work, right? The more I said, oh, this is the guy for me to start with. And so it was. So we're going to show you a lot of these magical things, and then like mysterious happenings, like, well, the truth that this cycle actually brings the opportunity for the moon to transit the galactic center, which is not on the sun's path. It's not on the ecliptic. It's not at the heart of the zodiac, but south of that. And right now, for some of you, when I speak that language, you're like, what are you talking about? I'm going to show you a lot of illustrations and animations that will help you understand that. And then we're going to apply it. And then the pictures that I could show you today are going to be so much deeper because you'll actually see the mechanics behind it, right? But again, our most important intention here is not, that kind of science class side. I find that that's really helpful if you want to align yourself kind of fully to these opportunities, but it is to help you align, to open your heart. So if you don't choose, by the way, to join us on this journey, just please know that the Cancer moon, the Gemini Cancer cusp, and I'm talking tropical zodiac here, okay? Or the moon when she ingresses Capricorn every month for this entire year of 2023 and 2024, even more so. It's peaking in the beginning of 2025. But these moons will either be super high in your sky or super low in the sky, depending on the sign and where on Earth you're looking from. They will rise on places and set in places on the horizon that the sun could only dream to go. It is a powerful thing. And hopefully this preview has helped turn you on to wanting to know more. And whether you join us for more of these teachings, your teacher is in you and the classroom is outside. We're just here to help give you some keys to that temple so you can dive in deeper and to bring together a community where we can work some of this magic together, because we know in this, amazing time where we can connect our own nodes around the World Wide Web, we can do this dragon line work, right? And you're each a sacred site. So we're really looking forward to sharing this information and bringing you into these mysteries. Seminar 1 of how high and how low the moon, and spending some time with Daniel and his experiences at Callanish in Scotland. Monday, February 27th. Monday, March 13th, a couple weeks later, we will play with the sun dance and the moon dance on the horizons, and bring you to Chimney Rock and some other sites actually here in the Americas, sites that people just never hear about that were so amazing. So many of these sites were just destroyed and are no longer known. But as I shared before, kind of one of the coolest sites has been preserved because it's a golf course. And I've walked it, it's crazy. And there is now a movement to take the golf course away and return it to its original state that the mound builders, the unknown mound builders, first constructed to align to the sun during the year, the moon during the year, and then the moon during the kind of longer lunar standstill period.
I should mention regarding that at the event, that in-person event that you'll be at in April, there's a woman who'll be coming to present, who's made it her passion and study about all the different mound structures in Ohio in that area. And that's Vivian Hurley, which I look forward to having you meet. She'll be doing her research and presentations on that area.
Oh yeah, I've met Vivian. She is awesome, and I'm really stoked to hear her. I mean, I had a powerful opening at Serpent Mound out there, and then there's so many of these sites. This wisdom, the immensity of some of these sites in the mound building culture is just, it's just stellar, frankly. So anyway, I think enough today. I do want to take you to a couple places where you can play, whether you want to join us on this journey, and we sure hope you will. By the way, of course, if you can't make the jams live, everything will be recorded and on a course page where you will have lifetime access to go review, and I bet you will want to. And you can find at our websites as well other offerings. So I'm at GeminiBrett.com. If you go to GeminiBrett.com/standstill, I think you go to my website for about a millisecond, and then it gets redirected quite quickly to turningoftheages.com, the home place for the Turning of the Ages Mystery School, where you can find all sorts of offerings and teachings there. You can find at GeminiBrett.com like kind of a quite long journey called the Golden Year of Earth Astrology, as well as a sacred astronomy course. And I'm really excited to share here some of what I've developed for that material. Let me find my way to the World Wide Web and take you to a couple places. One is the Giamario approach.com, which is Daniel's site. It's a place that we'll play a bit along the way because Daniel has so many photos of his journeys. Let me look at all this around the world in these sacred sites. Do you want to say anything about that, Daniel, before I move on?
Well, no, it's just that you can check out all these different places that had been really important to me since 1981. There's even some vintage photos in there from Mount Shasta with the group of women and men who were around Joan Halifax when we were meeting in council. Actually, you can see it there, the one on the bottom right. Yeah, there's Joan with her group, and then there's also one in there about when we were sitting in council on the mountain. That one there. That's at the right before we all went out alone onto the mountain. That was 1980, summer of 1981, the Aquarian full moon, the Vision Quest full moon, actually, which became then a local Shasta tradition. That's just one example.
And here's some images from Fish Lake Valley, which Daniel was speaking about quite earlier. I mean, there's so many that it's broken the World Wide Web, at least in this particular
Oh God,
browser.
why did it come out like that? That's when I previewed it before.
It might be just this particular browser. And so Haleakala and much more. And we'll be spending some time with some of these photos at
Here,
Callanish as
hang on,
well.
stop. That one there, that is another, this is really interesting. This is also on the same latitude in northern Scotland. And on the East Coast, they would erect these recumbent stone circles with a rock altar with the two stones, the recumbent stones, and the moon would rise on the altar
Wow.
during the standstill. And if you move at a certain speed, you can keep the moon suspended on the altar. And that would also be on the 18th and 19th year. That's in Pembrokeshire, not Pembrokeshire, Aberdeenshire of northern Scotland. That was incredible. So that's not Callanish there, but that's this other site that I had an opportunity to explore, which are the moon altars that are on the east coast of Scotland.
And I've seen spots in the tropics where you get stones like this, but they're more like to lie on so you can engage with the zenith phenomena.
That was me lying in the center of the circle, look, which is when I was there for that, it was not a lunar standstill season, but it's not only pointed at where the moon walking on the land would be, but it was also pointing toward the local sacred mountain in the distance, so they had it all lined up like that.
Beautiful. So if you want to go play, check out the GiamarioApproach.com. Also turningoftheages.com is a place where if you just scroll down, that's one of the places where you can learn more about the seminar series and sign up. Join us on this journey. Again, the next jam is on February 27th. That's where we begin. If you can't make it live, you will be able to access a course page where the recordings are there. You'll find all the Zoom links kind of easily shown there. I'm, as I said before, going to offer a couple little kind of homework PDFs so you can integrate this outside and also bring it into your chart work if you're a practicing astrologer like we are. And then here, as we were saying before, Turning of the Ages Mystery School, TOTAMS is going to have a gathering, an actual in-person gathering where we can be side by side engaging with the sky. I'm going to be there teaching some astrology, learning a lot of astrology, teaching astronomy, learning astrology, playing some saxophone. I'm very excited to do that.
We're going to have a jam night of some great musicians playing together, including John Dumas.
The great John Dumas. So come join us. We would love to have you there. You can find out all about it there at Turning of the Ages Mystery School. I'm just going to bring you quickly to my site so you can see what that looks like. And there's a lot of information that you can find around here, including moon songs if you want to listen to some musical interpretations of the new moon charts from last year. So we invite you to play. We're so glad you could come around here today. When I look at some of these questions, yeah, I mean, I guess we could try to find short answers because they're big questions, but I'm interested in, Daniel, if you've been to this place. Edna asks about the Temple of the Sun and the Temple of the Moon in Utah.
I have not. I haven't had the opportunity to explore Utah sites. So I don't know.
One of my favorite is Hovenweep, right at the Four Corners.
I've definitely been there.
Amazing, but I don't know about those temples. So Edna, tell us more about them. And one thing I like to do is go explore using planetarium software and Google Earth to go draw some alignments from the bird's eye view. It's never real until you're there with your feet on the ground, but I can get a start. And so that also applies to this comment from P Smoker, which is, will the holy well of Santa Cristina in Sardinia be discussed? Do you know that site?
No, but I certainly do know my good friend from Bavaria. She loves Sardinia. We were actually planning a Sardinia trip right before the COVID thing started, but we haven't been able to go back there. She's very familiar with it. There's a lot of astronomical oriented sacred sites on Sardinia. So I don't have any personal experience with that, but Sardinia is a great one. I mean, that was definitely one of the bases of the Sea People, the last attempt of the ancient matrilineal people to hold out against the Kurgans that were coming down. So I mean, that's a very interesting area.
I'm hearing, I hope you will include sites where these water crossings exist. We will, some probably that we don't know about, and there's so many that we're not sure if they do lunar standstill happenings yet, and there's so many sites on the Earth that haven't even been found. I'll say, because I see Tashi saying here that, these always found the kind of power of these water crossing sites. At Machu Picchu, and at these are ancient, way older than we're told or suggested sites in Peru. And you can see actually then another culture later on built and then later on built. But you will often find these kind of devices where water's traveling in two paths and then it crosses in a fountain, in kind of a pool, and then it'll go and then it'll cross again. And like at Machu Picchu, they call them like the baths of the virgins. And maybe at a time. But we can do science experiments actually right at home where we can charge water, negative and positive, and then cross it, and you can create energy. And it's my feeling that that's what was happening there at Machu Picchu and at many of those other sites. And I think that whether you're doing this with, like cathodes and modern images of electricity or not, like this is happening energetically in the air. These are places where, we are opened up. So I can't agree with you more.
It's well known human beings are mainly water crystals. And the crystals of water can evolve, unlike silicon that can only be programmed. So water is really what makes an authentic human being, is the mysteries of water.
So there's a question here. So at lower latitudes, we can only see the moon's highest point. No, everywhere on Earth, actually, until you get close to the Arctic circles, Arctic Circle and Antarctic Circle, you will experience a high sun and a low sun every year. We call those summer and winter solstice, right? You will experience a high moon and a low moon every month when the moon gets to the solstice degrees. And I just invite you to go outside and experience that. Like I might be speaking a foreign language to you right now, and I get it, right? When we're looking at these things on a chart, it's like whatever, the moon's in Cancer, or that's the moon's home, great, When you go outside, you're like, damn, that's a high moon. And wow, the full moon at winter solstice time is in the northern solstice degree on the other side. So when the sun is low, the full moon is high. And when you just start learning these things outside, and the sky will initiate you and teach you, like, again, we are here to help you, like, know when to go, but what you receive when you're in there will happen in your own language, right? And we can't wait to hear what you have to report. So you can see the high moon and the low moon everywhere on Earth. You can see the north moon and the south moon everywhere on Earth.
There is an interesting feature, though, that if you're looking at where the moon will walk on the land, there's way more places in the northern hemisphere where that's possible. But to get down to 58, 59 south latitude, there's, that's south of almost every place where there's land.
Yeah, there's so much more places in the northern and southern hemisphere, unless you roll like a dolphin.
You have to go to 58, 59 degrees south latitude to have the moon walk on the land.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I love seeing and experiencing, like I got part of my significant astronomical awakening was kind of focused on my time in Peru, and in Australia as well. So I can't wait to spend more time in the Southern Hemisphere, actually, and the tropics have taught so much as well. But yeah, this, what we're going to show you in these seminars, you will experience wherever you are on Earth. And I'm reading in the chat, like, I wish I lived in an area where the stars and planets are visible. um, I wish I lived in an area with less light pollution myself, but I bet you right now, if clouds allow and you go out after sunset, you will be staring at Venus and Jupiter just like I am right now and outside this window, and it's beautiful and they're coming together. And I can't think of any place on Earth where the moon is not visible in the sky, right? So, what we're tuning you into here, you don't need dark skies to have this experience. But you should come to Oracle, Arizona next month and really drink
Clear skies.
lots of
April is
stars.
very clear in April.
All right. So this was a really interesting comment, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, Daniel. Elise wrote, the harmonic convergence was in 1987. Is that just an interesting coincidence? Because as you said before, that was one of these lunar standstill times.
Well, the reason why I got to be to prove this stuff out in for the old legends in Callanish is because I was invited to be a facilitator on a harmonic convergence trip. And one of the sites that was always listed, oh, we need to go activate a certain site and that kind of thing, was Callanish. And since I knew about it and I knew the old stories, I got to be on that trip to be a facilitator because it was harmonic convergence. You can ask a question like that and say, well, 1969, 68, 69 was hugely important. 1987, basically, I look at it historically. I think that when you have a lunar standstill season, there's something quite profound about those time periods. I'm not aware of Argueas or some of the other spokespersons for harmonic convergence were aware of the lunar standstill. It just so happened that is when, at least in North America, the door was broken open. So finally the archaeoastronomers were saying, yeah, I guess they did know something.
Friends, sun, moon, and earth, right? And that's what these alignments are about, right? Like, this is not just some like theoretical jam or journey that we're on, right? And it's good to know. It's good to know so you'll know when to go. But it is happening regardless. And we can expect some changes here on Earth. And hopefully more of this awareness will bring more of the awakening that we need so the ship doesn't sink.
We have booked a small hotel there for that time period in the summer of 2020, next year, actually. Yeah, geez. Right at the time period of the week when the moon walks on the land. So that's one of the things we've been planning for a long time.
And then, right, so then there's a no, I meant these out of bounds moons. Yeah, the out of bounds moons are the most north and the most south moons. So you're asking all the right questions. A lot of these questions are coming from the same person. You are asking all the right questions, and I'm going to answer all of those questions. And I need some time to show you some beautiful pictures and illustrations and animations I've made so you can really grok it. But most importantly, once again, after I show you the theory, we will show you the timings so you can go outside and experience this, and then it's going to speak your language.
As well as a little bit relating it to your own chart too. If you happen to be in that magic window of time where you have an extreme out of bounds moon, and you have to be in the solstice, near the solstice signs in order for that to be true.
I'm just seeing on the YouTube side, I think no questions right now. A couple of folks saying they weren't able to get into the Zoom, so they were happy it was there. We will make sure when you register for the class that you have everything that you need to make it to the things live. And then a question came in that we already answered, but smart to answer again. Yes, everything will be recorded. It will be very conveniently placed on one page online that you will have secret access to. And so you can go back and review these things again and again and again. I will be working with the maestro Awen, who right now is behind the scenes, to get some PDFs over there and some homework assignments. Like the things that I'm I'm really interested in you also having the opportunity to do some chart practice with that. So we can talk about that in the Q&A, but also give you a little homework that you can do to bring in things like lunar latitude or zodiac declination into your world and other nerd speak, which is so far beyond mind play alone. When you start bringing that awareness deep into your heart, then you just become even more human.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I was really glad that I had the first awareness of the out of bounds phenomena on the land, before I ever understood it on a chart, or even looked at it on a chart. So the ground on it was really well. It was foundationally very strong for me.
So the last question I want to answer now from Portia is, how do you know if your natal moon is out of bounds? You know if any of your planets, natally or otherwise, are out of bounds if their declination exceeds the tilt angle of Earth. So you're likely going to have to go to an astrology software that lets you see the declination of your planets. And if the declination exceeds 23 degrees, 26 minutes, and 15 seconds of arc, either north or south, then that thing is out of bounds. And it wants you to freak out and tend to your awarening.
And the other factor is they're much more likely to have a better shot of it being true if that planet or the moon is in signs that are close to the solstice points. So, Gemini, Capricorn, Gemini, Cancer, or Sagittarius, Capricorn. During the most extreme standstill season, it can shift over into the sign before, the sign after. But the most important thing is that it's the signs near the solstice.
Yeah, and even further out, like we just had an out of bounds moon in Aquarius.
Right. We're now by the end of the year, it's going to be 28.
Yeah, and we're going further and further out. I'll share some of my own kind of cosmological ideas about what I feel like that means in regards to incarnation and spirit and soul. And I can't wait to jam more with you on that, Daniel, and to bring many of y'all in here and to hear your thoughts, and as we connect in community to explore this great phenomena that was celebrated by ancients all around the world. We know that. The question is, why? What were they doing? What can we do to hear that why from the earth in the sky? That's the plan, and we welcome you aboard. So a quick link is geminibrett.com/standstill. Brett has twin T's, by the way. I put that link down below. And you could also go to the Turning of the Ages Mystery School. turningoftheages.com. Let me just put those on the screen as I say that again. Either of those links down at the bottom will bring you where you need to be to join our journey. We will see you there. The next trip is on Moon Day, February 27th. Until then, Daniel, unless you have anything else you'd like to say, I think it's time to offer blessings and say we'll see you